because she had also just, left Nicole Bitchie and, was in the process of starting XO Necole. So XO Necole hadn't started officially yet. So she was just trying to gather a team together essentially to help, go into the launch of the brand. So she asked me about being a feature editor. I told her, well, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I also just quit my job. And she's like, oh, well, in that case, can you do managing editor?
Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast, powered by the African American Marketing Association. Each week, we'll bring you an insightful conversation from some of the best experts in our industry on how to advance our career. Join the collective of Black marketers across the world, advancing their brand as we work towards creating a collaborative community.
And welcome to another edition of Marketing for the Culture podcast. I am your host, podcast producer, CL Palmer, aka CZ Pod Gang. And today, I have another speaker from the Marketing for the Culture Summit. I have writer, journalist, and all around just good person on the internet, because you're really out here doing some good things, inspiring people on your blog. I see some of the things that you've been able to connect. And I have Kiah McBride.
Hey.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Kiah, it's a lot of things I could ask you, but I guess I want people to get to know you off rip and really get into the weeds of, I guess, kind of how you got here to the place that you're at. And I just wanted to make sure I had all my facts correct. So you did a lot of things that I would say were very notable in your time at Howard. I seen you had, internships at, BET, NASCAR, Nike. I'm just like, somebody must have thought you were special, to keep getting picked by those major brands. And I want to say, like, when you got finished doing all of those things, where did you see you going next?
Yeah. So first, thank you. It's just interesting thinking back, like, I guess at this point, almost like 10, 12 years ago.
Before you get that, LinkedIn is very impressive on the surface. I'm gonna just say that.
Thank you. I probably should update it more. I'm gonna do better. But yeah, so coming out of, I guess, college, it was interesting because when I went in, my intention was actually to do journalism. So I wanted to do business just so I had some flexibility in terms of like what jobs I could get. But my intention was to double major in journalism because I really wanted to write for magazines. But just how Howard was set up, I wasn't able to do that, without having to stay at college much longer. So, and because I wasn't majored in journalism, I struggled to get journalism jobs outside of like just random local things or working, I worked with a on-campus magazine that students started, like stuff like that. So I was still building my portfolio, but I wasn't able to get those jobs for some reason. My assumption is because I had marketing on my resume. And so I was starting to get a lot of those marketing related jobs. But what I found kind of early on was that I would say this was probably the start of me figuring out my brand, because I realized a lot of those companies, even though they were big, companies and I was going in for marketing roles, they liked me because of my writing background. So a lot of the times what they would bring me in to do in some form of fashion connected to writing or, storytelling in some way. And so that's how I would start to pitch myself when I would go out for these jobs and interviews. And even to this day, that's kind of what I push myself to say. Like, that's how I usually present myself, because I see how it can be of value and kind of give me a unique edge, I guess. The one that stands out to me probably most was when I interned at Nike. So I was in their global marketing team, and they brought me in to help essentially with the voice of the social brand, because they had so many different, at the time, I think it was like maybe Instagram and Twitter, but they had so many different channels with the different
Yeah.
localizations. So they wanted kind of like this one unified voice. So I actually created a social media style guide for them that helped them kind of hone in on one voice. Now that was my intern project. I did other stuff too, more related to social. But what I also ended up doing while there was I was encouraged to also write for the blog. So at the time they had a Nike sportswear blog where they would like interview different people and whatnot. So it wasn't a part of my actual job, but I connected with people on that team and I was like, hey, I'd love to do this. So I did a little bit of work for them, just actually doing essentially journalism work. From there, it actually, when I left that internship, because it was my junior year that I had interned with them, so going into my senior year, they actually offered me some freelance work to keep doing the work for the blog. So that was actually probably my first, I want to say, officially paid gig. So I was in college, senior year,
Okay.
writing for Nike Sportswear. So in that sense, there was like a combination of, I guess, communication and whatnot. My job after college, my first one anyway, I was actually in a rotational program. I was supposed to rotate through different departments for a year. And then at the end of that year, I was supposed to be able to, kind of to a degree, choose which department I wanted to stay in. So I started in the social media department at the agency, and we had different clients like UPS and Lincoln and Coca-Cola and stuff like that. So that I loved doing that job. Unfortunately, the program had to come to an end early because they had to essentially the company had to go on a hiring freeze, and they needed all of us who were in the program to actually like work full time. So I kind of got pushed into this. What was my title? Essentially, it was like project management type of role, like account management. So I actually didn't stay there much longer after that because it really wasn't what I wanted to do. And it really wasn't marketing. It wasn't writing. So I actually left that job. But I would say, most of my like corporate jobs were probably a blend. Like it wasn't like corporate communications necessarily, but again, there was always some writing aspect to it. It just wasn't
Gotcha.
like always like the glitzy glamour type of writing.
Understood. Now, since you did bring up glitz and glamoury type of writing, I want to talk about your time at XO Necole.
Okay.
Because you come out of your last job and you end up at this online publication and you're a managing editor, and that's a like highly visible job. So you're doing things that people are ingesting, digesting, however you want to say it, on a daily basis. And so when you got there, did it really feel like you was in the game for real?
I yes. So one, as I said, I didn't come from a journalism background, so I never had any formal journalism training. All of my journalism work came from me just loving the craft and studying other great journalists and reading books. So because I never had that formal training, again, I was always just put in interesting positions. So really with XO Necole, that's an interesting story, and I'm trying to figure out how to best tell it because it's a bigger story. But essentially, I actually worked I was freelancing for a site prior to XO Necole. It was ran by this woman named Angela. Benton, and she had a tech-centered brand company, and they just had a digital component in which they would tell the stories of minorities who were working essentially in the kind of like the digital tech space. So she brought me on to manage that site, and I was solo working that site. I was the writer. I was the person who put the stories up. At some point, I did, hire a couple other freelancers, but for the most part, I ran that site all by myself. So when I was working there, I actually interviewed Nicole Kane, who's the founder of XO Necole. At the time, she was, of course, running NicoleBitchy.com. But I was essentially telling her story of, becoming this like huge digital creator. And I guess she liked the story so much so this was in 2013 that I interviewed her. 2015, on social media, I would always continue to connect with her, just reach out like randomly. So in 2015, I actually was doing nothing that related to journalism, marketing, or anything of excitement. And essentially it was like, I refer to it as my toxic job, because just the work environment, it just wasn't the best. I did well in it, but it just mentally, it was a lot. And so I actually quit my job. I had no other prospects lined up. I just was like, I have to write. Like, I can't like do this other stuff. I'll figure it out. So like maybe a couple weeks after I quit, Nicole actually reached out to me. She reached out initially to see if I could be a feature editor. Cause she had also just, left Nicole Bitchy and, was in the process of starting XO Necole. So XO Necole hadn't started officially yet. So she was just trying to gather a team together essentially to help, go into the launch of the brand. So she asked me about being a feature editor. I told her, well, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I also just quit my job. And she's like, oh, well, in that case, can you do managing editor? And of course I said yes, because, for me, the thing is like, I love a good challenge. So even though that wasn't my background and I didn't have any like full blown experience, like in a traditional way, I knew that I would figure it out. But, it was definitely a challenge because a lot of that time was me building relationships and connections and, her kind of having her own set of relationships and connections was super helpful. But we essentially had to build that brand from scratch. So I played a big role in just, how the writing was done and, getting new writers and, just the branding in itself. Of course, she had marketing people as well, but
right.
I kind of came in from scratch with that brand. It wasn't one where it was already like super established and had everything going on. So it was just an interesting experience all around, just because I was coming in almost in startup mode, which I, in my opinion, kind of is a different kind of challenge.
Right.
And I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, you good. I'm like, because I kind of want to know, like, what happened, because it seemed like that was a good place for you to really expand. I guess almost like what you thought you were capable of. Because you pretty much had been just doing it as a job along with these other things, but now you're kind of getting the chance to take your creative juices and just go as far as you can.
Right.
And so I really found that to be interesting, and just, based on some of the stuff that I learned about you, I thought that was probably one of those moments, because I know, looking at myself, I would feel like, yeah, this is my moment. This is my time. I'm about to show y'all what I could do, and y'all gonna know my name after this. And so that I was feeling that. So I guess to follow up, what were some of the things that you were most proud of doing while you were at XO Necole?
Well, definitely the feature stories, because I was managing editor, but I also wrote a lot of the celebrity features and the what we call girl boss features, so Black women entrepreneurs, and a little mix of like we had another section called XO Man, which was more. It wasn't necessarily it was notable men, but it wasn't as like centered around entrepreneurship, and they weren't always necessarily celebrities.
Gotcha.
But I would say that was those articles I'm just so proud of. One, because just the process of having to pitch and work with publicists or the individual themselves and really being able to capture their stories and tell them in a way that some of these people didn't really have articles on them before, and so when they would see it, they're like, wow, like you truly like captured this story well. And those stories, for a lot of them, I think also helped the readers. The goal was to inspire and motivate. And so it was something that, in my opinion, was beyond me. Like, it wasn't about me and trying to be this, be perceived a certain way. It was just me focusing on telling other people's narratives in a way that captured them at their essence and at their core. And so and that was it wasn't the first time I'd obviously wrote those type of articles. But the continued practice of doing it for me made me feel like I was growing as a writer as well. And I was, again, pushed. Sometimes I was in situations I had never been in, and I had to like push past any moments of like self-doubt or fear or whatever and say, now we got to get this story. We got to make it happen. We got to figure it out. And so it was a challenge for me as well, just like all around. Like I learned so much, both from the people I interviewed, working with Nicole, I learned a lot. And then, going out in the world and figuring things out, like that really grew me as a person, and gave me the confidence to do other things later down the road. So I would say I'm most proud of that aspect. I think they were just such great stories, not just because I wrote them, but
right.
but just, the people that you learn about and meet and get, see what their background is. Like, it was a beautiful time.
I love that. And I read some of your features. You do have people very engaged, and they seem to want to go deep with you a little bit more surface. So I guess I'll transition, but I do want to ask one more question. I get, when we're talking about doing features, is there anybody that you would really want to sit down and do an interview that you just haven't had a chance to, or you felt like it's just like super interesting and you want to just crack the can open and get as much as you can?
Sheesh. I feel like I needed that question in advance so I could think on it.
I know. I kind of, honestly, I just came up with that question. So if I'm gonna keep it a buck.
I'll say I maybe recently I was like thinking like I would love to like interview the guys of the Earn Your Leisure podcast, just because I listen to them, and I'm, obviously you hear them and doing their interviews, but I'm very like curious of their overarching story. And also I like doing interviews with people I can learn a lot from. But also have a bit more insight into who they are as like actual people and the human side of them. So like, I feel like with a lot of people, because we present certain aspects of ourselves, we don't know like the deep human side of people. And I'm always curious about the human side. So
I would say the guys from Earn Your Leisure they're getting up to that celebrity status. The more
right.
I keep watching them, the more people keep recommending them. They talk about their content, and I'm just becoming acquainted with their content personally, and I'm just like, y'all kind of deep into the game. I'm like, I didn't really know it was like that. And I was
Right.
like, oh yeah, y'all got picked up by Black Effect. That's cool. But it's like, oh no, it's like a whole channel of y'all doing all these different financial and um, money making things. It's just like, oh, okay. It's like I see it now. It's like I understand what this is. Like I didn't really get it, but I understand. So yeah, I'm kind of curious about their story as well. So,
So because there's not a lot out on them. So like I said, a lot of my interviews at XO Necole were with people who didn't have a ton of stories on them prior to me coming. So like, for instance, Melissa Butler of the Lip Bar, like, we told that story, and she of course already had some stuff out there just because she was on Shark Tank, but I think that article did so well. That was years ago. Zoma St. John, who's, I'm not sure where she's at now, but at the time when I interviewed, she was marketing at Apple Music, and there weren't really any articles on her. So that article got picked up by a bunch of other outlets. So like, I guess I like talking to people who it's not easy to just find their information out there already. Like, but they also have so much value and so much to offer. And like you said, Earn Your Leisure guys, they're becoming their own celebrity, and the type of people they're even interviewing. Like there's, that's a whole journey. Like you have to have a certain level of respect to get that, like, so. So I think that's why I chose them, but more so because I was just thinking about it like maybe a couple weeks ago. I was like, that'd be cool.
You said something. You said you wanted to get into the human side of Earn Your Leisure. So I want to kind of get into the human side of Kiah McBride, because your personal brand is, it's very personal.
Yeah.
It for lack of a better term, because you really get into the weeds of who you are, kind of what you're going through, and telling your story. So give me I don't want to say the reason. Let me say that over. Tell me what really motivated you to be so, like full frontal with who you are in your blog.
Yeah. I started that blog around 2015. And I don't think, to be honest, I don't think at the time I thought that deep about it. It was way more personal back then. I've actually like toned it down. I think I just the type of stories I wanted to write. Because I actually, outside of journalism, I wanted to do fiction writing. So just the type of narratives I kind of gravitated to. I always like, things related to like personal help and personal growth, but not necessarily always in a tell-all type of way, but just like, just real stuff. Like people go through real stuff. And I felt like at the time, like blogging was a huge thing, and like there was just all these different bloggers. And so I actually feel like there was a community of us who were doing more personal blogging. And it was such a beautiful time. I really hope we get back to that Renaissance age, because there's just so many dope writers that their pen game is just beautiful. I actually hired some of them when I was at XO Necole. But yeah, I think it was just like, I just wanted to be honest about certain aspects of my life. And, I'm not a person that pretends I'm something I'm not. So, I didn't have, and I'm not a person that's afraid to be vulnerable. I will say that with the caveat of, I'm very particular about what I do put out. So anything I put out is something I'm already comfortable putting out to a degree, or I've already processed it. But I think it was a combination of just wanting to just tell real and honest narratives. And also, you know, a lot of the things I was experiencing, I didn't want to be a self-help person because I'm like, I can't tell you what to do in your situation. Like, I don't want to be the person trying to like guide someone. But I felt like my story in and of itself was my way of saying like, this is what I did and this is how I overcame, or this is how I did X, Y, Z. Like, and I think when you center it around your story, people don't feel like you're trying to tell them what to do.
Mm.
'Cause nobody, like, people rebel against advice and guidance. Like, people don't want to feel judged and they don't want to
What?
feel, you know, feel a certain way. And so sometimes I would just tell aspects of my story to, one, let it be known, like, hey, I'm not any like drastically different than another person. Like, I go through things, I have my moments, I have things that I'm, you know, battling and overcoming in all aspects of life. And I think that's what I was aiming for at that time. Um yeah, and I
Okay.
honestly, I just feel like to some degree I never overthought. That's probably the one area I just didn't overthink. I overthink everything else. Um,
Mm.
that was what honestly naturally flowed out of me. So I have to say, probably it's something that God desired for me to share, for whatever reason. Like, so if I feel it on my spirit to share, I'll go ahead and share it.
That's dope. And that's something that I actually need to do myself. I have a lot of conversations with my homies, and I'll be dropping things that I be having going on, and they be hanging on to it. I'm like, I probably should put this into something that other people can learn from. But of course, life gets in the way, and you can only choose so much to do. Um, so I'm glad you are doing that, and I even went back to some of your old blogs from like 3 years ago, and I see some of the comments, and I'm like, "Oh, you're like, you really out here pushing people?" I'm like, "Okay, this is doing something for somebody."
So yeah, you just need one person.
Yeah, that's it. That's all you need. That's enough validation to know that you put some time in, and it actually made a difference in one person's life, and
Right.
that difference carries on to the next day, and the next, and so on. I feel like that's when we're starting to hit our true purpose. Uh,
Exactly.
and I guess to come around to that, so you say you've been doing your personal blog and you're freelancing. So kind of that time between XO Necole and right now, I'm sure you went through a lot of development.
Absolutely.
Um, so kind of take me on a couple of those turning points that forced you to where you are now.
Oh man. So part of it started right after I moved out to LA. So I moved out to LA to obviously continue my work with XO Necole, but because at the time, again, when I started working for her, I had just quit my job. I had actually moved back home into North Carolina because I was supposed to be figuring out my next steps. So I stayed there for a few months, and I realized like I'm not going to get what I need for this role sitting, in North Carolina. I have to go somewhere. But we talked about moving to LA, and I already wanted to go to LA anyway. So I moved out there, but shortly after moving out there, the finances changed essentially.
Cost of living.
Yeah, both the cost of
Yeah,
living, but also my income changed.
right.
Just because at the time this was pre-acquisition with Will Packer Media, so
Ah,
Nicole was funding everything herself, and
startup life.
yeah, so
Mm.
it was there was a shift in my pay structure, and again, yeah, being out in LA is not a cheap city, and with how much, like, people don't realize with startup coaches, you're working long hours. So I would sometimes be working 12-hour days. So I don't really have time to pick up yet another job. This is my full time and my after hour job. So I ended up ultimately having to when I was forced into like figuring out some other income options. And over time, it became a thing where I realized I wasn't really doing what I felt purpose to do. Of course, I was doing freelance writing and I was still working with XO Necole, but I was starting to pick up other gigs that weren't in alignment with who I am and my purpose. Not anything bad or crazy, but just stuff that didn't bring me joy. I wasn't like waking up every day loving it, or some of it had nothing to do with my career. And so that was what kind of pushed me to leave LA, because I was like, LA is not a city you want to be in and not be clear on why you're there, because you can easily get lost. I knew a lot of people who went out there with big dreams, but, life happened and they kind of, went by the wayside, and I didn't want to be that person. And so I came back my intent was to come back to Atlanta. I thought, with my resume, I would get a good job, and just things weren't lining up. It took 3 more months of not having income to finally get a job, which is where I'm at now. And again, I got it in part because of my writing background, because my job initially was a technical content writer. So even though I hadn't really truly worked in tech prior to that, like I was utilizing my background of being a writer to get that role into segue into tech, which also was pretty eye-opening because, tech's a whole different tax bracket. Like, so as a writer and a creative, we're always focused on the very pretty and fun and, entertainment and this, that, and the other, but the real money's over in tech. So, and I never made that connection when I was younger. I wish I had. I probably would have done things a bit differently. But so yeah, that kind of is what brought me to where I was at. And I think, over time, I was just getting back on my feet, essentially. Like a lot of people don't know, I moved to Atlanta with nothing, only what would fit in my car. So my first month, because I had been unemployed, I was behind on bills. Like my first month at my job, I was sleeping on an air mattress and, going to work each day, and I was eating the food there, gaining weight because, it wasn't healthy, but it was free. And I was like, I was just climbing my way out of the hole that I essentially had ended up in. And I think it just really ignited my hustle spirit. And over time, as I got better in a better financial place, you start to be able to think more clearly and more creatively, and you start to get your spark back, and you want to go back and try new things. And so that's kind of where I'm at now, where I'm like, okay, I'm in a good place. Like I'm able to accomplish a lot of the goals that I've had on my vision board for years. So now it's I feel like I'm getting back to who I am at my essence, which is allowing me to think differently, essentially. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, hopefully I answered that.
That's an amazing story, and one that I can kind of relate to. That there's had a lot of dark times as well. So I could feel that. That really touched my soul. I'm not just saying that to be facetious. But Kai, you have an amazing journey, and I want people to keep up with you and check out everything that you're doing. So if you could tell people where to find you and get in touch with you.
Yeah. Well, depending on, I guess, you can always find me on social, Instagram, Twitter, even YouTube, even though that's not active. Instagram and Twitter at Write on Kiah. So WriteOnKiah. I also have my blog, writeonkiah.com, and that's more of where you will find creative writing. And then professional writing is KiahMcBride.com. So you can shoot me an email through there as well.
That's dope. And before you get out of here, what type of energy can people expect for you to bring to the Marketing for the Culture Summit this May 12th?
I mean, I bring all the vibes. I'm a happy person. I like to, hopefully I bring, positive and good energy, but also, a feeling of wisdom and understanding and connection. Because again, we're all just trying to figure it out, even sometimes I don't really think about all the things I've done because I'm still like in the process. So, so it's always refreshing to have these kind of conversations because now I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that, huh? So, you know, I empathize, I understand, and I relate and connect with, you know, pretty much everybody. And I hope that that's the energy I bring.
I can't wait. We all going to be in the building. Everybody out there listening and watching, I want to see you there. Kiah, thank you so much for your time and kicking it with us on the podcast. This has been Marketing for the Culture. Thank you for everybody for listening and watching. And we out here. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Marketing for the Culture podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, our videos are on YouTube. If you have a moment, feel free to give us a rate, review, or just comment. We appreciate our sponsors for their continuous support. Also, if you're interested in learning more about our sponsors or becoming a member of the African American Marketing Association, visit aa-ma.org.